Note from the future, if you're here for the discussion of FTX, you can skip ahead to the 23-minute mark and save yourself some time at the cost of some context. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Van Nostren, professional internet hobo.
I'm Timothy Talene Lawton. I don't have a title.
I'm Austin. I run a bunch of projects.
Including you founded Manifund, currently run Manifest, a little bit run Manifest, and run Manifund.
Yes. So I started Manifold, the prediction markets company. We spun out Manifund, a charity, which we're thinking about renaming, incidentally, because people make this mistake a lot. Like, they're no longer very related, the charity and the for-profit prediction markets platform. And recently we started Mox, the co-working space, which is where we're recording this very podcast.
Yes. So you can look forward to fewer car noises than our previous episodes. So we recorded a previous episode a couple of months ago that we didn't release because it was kind of too podcasty and fake. But after we turned off the mic, we of course got into a really interesting conversation where you said your North Star was winning. And my North Star was truth-seeking. Timothy, do you want to say what you've chosen for this conversation?
Yeah, I don't remember what I said at the time, but if I was going to make up something now, it might be flow or discerning flow.
Okay. And I find the idea of winning as the North Star horrifying. and have to acknowledge that you've accomplished a lot, and also have to acknowledge that that has come at some costs. And so I wanted to argue about winning versus truth-seeking versus flow.
That totally makes sense. Maybe just a disclaimer. I don't know if I would really say winning is my North Star versus compared to what I imagined my straw Elizabeth model.
Your comparative advantage North Star.
Maybe. Or compared to the Rashless ecosystem or something like that. I feel like winning is much more important to me in some way that I'd love to dive into.
Okay, great. Sure. Could you define winning?
Oh.
And now he's even more in pain.
Yeah. I think definitions are hard, and I wonder if examples are easier, or just stream of consciousness talking, something like, hitting the goals that you have set for yourself is a form of winning. Doing things with surprising quality in surprisingly not a lot of time is a kind of winning. Winning often seems to be about competition, right? You're winning if you're beating somebody or something. But I think the winning that matters to me most is winning versus, I don't know, less good versions of yourself. Here's another way to think about it. Winning in the context of a game, maybe a single player game. You are making choices throughout the world. And I think of winning as trying to figure out what the right choices are to bring you to, maximizing your score or hitting the story that you were hoping to tell to yourself. Things like that. Those are some things that come to mind around winning.
Okay. Let's pick a specific example.
Okay.
What would make Manifest, the conference, be winning versus not winning?
Sure. I can think of roughly what do I want out of Manifest, and there's always multiple different goals entangled. The most important one I always think of is I want it to be a good experience for the people who are there. And how do you quantify good experience? Maybe something like how much people are willing to pay for the kind of conference that Manifest is hoping to be, or how much do they tell their friends, you really needed to have come to this, you should come next year. What they fill out for an NPS score. Those are some metrics that you can attach to the tracking whether or not you are winning. But fundamentally, it is about did they really enjoy the conference? Is one piece of it. Another piece of it is on a physical level, is the conference itself making money? It is. We're figuring out a structure for what the Manifest org should be, but we're thinking it's kind of like an LLC, but also kind of an impact certificate. We're taking about your rabbit hole about, but. As an LLC, it will have some measure of trying to earn more in profits than it is spending in costs, and winning will be maximizing that number. And then other things that are winning are building out a sense of community around the people who are there, having them form connections. I would love for people to meet the love of their lives at Manifest and get married and make babies. famously, I met my wife at another conference called the Future Forum, and now we have a baby. And I would love
Who almost came to this podcast
almost
and
made
may
it.
still.
May still. We will see. But that's another kind of winning. Just the goal of bringing people together and having them like get something lasting from it in the form of connections, relationship, knowledge, things like that. So those are some goals which we could try to win against, maybe, or we could fail at if we like don't hit the level I have in my head, the best possible version of manifest. If we make the wrong choices, we would be like not winning as much, maybe losing.
My instinct is to bring in some like falsifiability for all these North Stars, because obviously probably all the things when we define them we'll all be excited about them to some extent, but like I'm curious, where we would expect your behavior or someone who's really focused on winning to diverge from someone who doesn't have that as like a principle or a North Star.
So again, I think of winning as making the right choices, and then versus Elizabeth North Star of truth seeking. I think when I hear the word truth seeking, what I think of is like learning, understanding, like making things correct, maybe sharing that correctness with the world. And those are extremely valuable, to be clear. I like care a lot about truth seeking.
I'm imagining like if you were more focused on truth seeking and less on winning, then maybe you'd be more looking at learning opportunities, even at the cost of like success of some of the projects you're working on or something. Whereas with winning, the way you talk about it, I'm imagining like getting accomplishments and like building towards whatever you're trying to do. Whereas truth seeking is more prioritizing the modeling.
That makes sense. That doesn't seem wrong.
One thing I was surprised to not hear you say when you mentioned winning at Manifest was something like getting attention or getting attention for manifold.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a piece of what I really enjoy about Manifest. One thing that like makes me want to support it. This year, I am kind of more behind the scenes, a producer, a person who's like lining up the funding and making intros, and not like on the ground organizing for it. But I will still care a lot about how much it pushes for like some kind of like getting attention for Manifold the company, which I still have a chunk of equity in, or prediction markets as a whole, as a piece of social technology that I like think matters a lot, or wider the forecasting field, or even wider like the mechanism design field. I think of helping out these like entities that I care about in the fields that I think would be good for the world. That's also a piece of winning, and I just forgot to mention it.
Sure. One reason I bring that up is so the biggest piece of publicity you got was the Guardian article.
For 2024.
2024, yeah.
Yes. Actually, I'm not even sure if that's true, but we got a lot of publicity there.
And it accused you of harboring racists.
That is also true.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you mentioned you want people to come to Manifest and feel comfortable. I know several people who were there had very uncomfortable conversations around race and aren't considering going back because that was so unpleasant for them.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Thank you for mentioning that here, I guess. I think the intent of Manifest is not to like be a controversial, edgy place where people like speak about race in ways that can make other people feel uncomfortable, honestly. I think there's like a little bit of like something went wrong last year, and we're still trying to like debug that and try to set things like a little bit better, set the tone. It is the case that we care a lot about things that are outside the traditional overreturn window, you might say, like modifying to genetics of embryos, for example, or like doing screening on embryos. It's like a kind of thing that we had people come and talk about, and sometimes is very controversial.
One of the models that came up when I was talking with those people was it wasn't necessarily the speakers who were the problem, and in some cases they even thought the speakers had interesting things to say. It's the people, the ticket buyers that they attract.
Yeah, and there's like a whole can of worms around like how you do screening or how you think about who comes to your conference. Historically, Manifest did not do screening around like who can buy a ticket, and we still aren't doing it this year. Maybe we should be. I'm not sure. I think it is probably the case that like because of the speakers we chose, some people who are more on the I want to like argue about race, thought like this is the conference for me, and I'm not sure how to signal that this is the wrong conference for that. Like I don't want to put on the website like don't come if you want to talk about race, but like maybe that's the thing we should do. I don't know. Yeah, and I'm worried actually about something like an evaporative cooling effect, where people who are more sensitive to this, like stop showing up to manifests, and people who feel like, oh yeah, I want to like argue about edgy things do show up. So I don't know. I'm hoping like talking on podcasts like this, or just like generally like telling the conference organizers and people coming that like, no, this is not really about that stuff. It's about prediction markets, forecasting, a bunch of other interesting like intellectual niches, but not a place to like yell at people. Sorry, I feel like this is like a bit of yeah.
It sounds like this wasn't your internal experience, but from the outside, it looks like you invited controversial people because that was part of winning and didn't care about the side effects.
Yeah, I think there's something like that you're pointing out that is like true, which is that like attention, you might even say like notoriety, is particularly important to Manifold as a company that is like trying to make its name known, that is trying to like get out there, like get more users, scale in the standard like venture capital pathways. And a thing that when I was running Manifold, was much more excited for, especially compared to, I don't know, institutions like maybe Lighthaven or people I see in the EA community. I was more excited for like making space for things that had potentially high upside and potentially some downside, I guess. I think that like lined up with Manifold, what I saw as like winning for Manifold, maybe growing the number of users, and also lined up with this, maybe like kind of who I am as a person. I like generally like trying things that are, you know, have some chance of like high upside. And yeah, I still feel pretty good about my choice of speakers specifically. One example, Richard Hanania was one who I took a lot of flack on the very first year ran Manifest. Some sponsors like withdrew, some like speakers dropped out because Richard Hanania specifically was coming. And Hanania was one of the several speakers cited in the Guardian article as like a person who had like a troubled background. But I don't know. Right now, I'm feeling quite good about it. In some sense, maybe it's because the like political winds have shifted with the Trump administration. Maybe it's because I just think Hanania himself as a person has been growing. He recently like voiced strong support for the Shrimp Welfare Project, which is also, I think, a charity that I particularly admire for their work in the welfare space. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like it was a risky call, but a risky bet, but one that I think has like paid off. I'm happy that I made that particular trade-off, for example.
That's interesting because I would have thought winning meant prioritizing a bunch of like keeping the sponsors and the other speakers rather than having the person you were most excited about.
Maybe it depends on like what like time scale and also like what the relative worth of different like goals you have are, because having some sponsors and speakers, that's some like money lost that we lose when we lose a sponsor, or some like interesting talks that we lose when we lose the speaker. But there's one thing which is like a more of like a principles thing, and I'm not sure if this ties into winning, but I think it might. We could like try to figure out why. The principle of like I don't want to like cave to pressure or something. I feel like I want to like be able to stand for what I see as really important. Another example, like maybe long ago, was like James Damore and Google. I was at Google actually at the time, and the Damore stuff like happened. It was like a lot of controversy. As a reminder, he was the one who published like kind of like a manifesto, they call it, about like gender differences and like Google's DEI hiring policies.
See, you say publish. He wrote it internally, and someone else shared it externally.
Yes, sorry, that is the correct way to frame that. And I remember being on the like side of like having read it myself. I was like, I mean, yes, I think he was like very insensitive about it, but I would like Google and the world to be the kind of place that can like tolerate this discourse. And I guess I was disappointed when it turned out that like Google decided to fire him. And I was like, oh, if I'm ever in a position like that, I hope to make the calls that are true to me. Yeah. So I don't know if this ties into winning at all. It's just like part of the calculus for making the decisions that I did make around controversial figures manifest.
Okay. Maybe I should talk about truth seeking now.
Sure.
So the thing for me is I don't know how to maintain any other principles without a certain level of truth seeking, because the information is inaccurate. You don't know if you're winning. Like if you didn't know how many people bought tickets to manifest, or you don't get the audience feedback that certain participants are being assholes and it makes them not want to come, then you can't know if you're winning.
Also, Austin already said that one of his, principles is also truth seeking. So I guess I was imagining that both of us would just be saying, yeah, like, definitely we want truth seeking as part of the package of strategy.
Okay. I feel like I put Austin on the spot, and so somebody should be asking me intense questions about, like, how many babies would I kill for truth seeking.
Well, okay, here's the first thing that comes to mind for me is, like, if truth seeking is your North Star, then does that mean that, like, you'd rather understand the world really well than have it go well?
But how do you know if it's going well if you don't have enough truth seeking?
Well, how much truth seeking is enough?
I think it's kind of definitionally hard to tell when you have enough, because you can never know what you don't know. That's kind of why it's a North Star instead of just enough, is you have to keep pursuing that because you don't know if you have enough, and because you're kind of naturally going to let it slack.
Although this makes it seem like it would be easy in any universe to, like, pursue it too far and to just, like, endlessly be truth seeking instead of, like, I don't know, improvement of some sort.
Yeah. Well, and like Austin, I have second principles too.
Right. I feel like part of what we're doing at this point, at least part of what I see us doing, is trying to even, like, define the difference between, like, being comparatively more excited about winning and comparatively more excited about truth seeking. Mm-hmm. Although I did hear a bit of a stronger, like, you were willing to own it as your North Star, which was more than I feel like we got out of Austin. I feel like we're not quite sure what if Austin had to pick one North Star, what he would choose.
Well, like, is there an amount of winning where you would say, okay, I'm done now?
That's interesting.
That's a great question. I want to say, like, not really. I don't know if this is too, like, 2020s, like, FTX EA, like, maximize utility kind of vibe going here. But I'm just like, if there's more to win, then we should, like, make those decisions, try to figure out how to bring us to the even better states of the world.
I notice I'm a lot more comfortable with winning when I restrict it to, like, everyone winning together, which I imagine is, like, part of the thing, but, like, a lot of your examples weren't really, there were, like, local winning of cooperative people or groups. But part of my issue with winning is, like, it sort of feels like there's inherently an ego in it or something, where it's like part of why I'm not, like, infinitely excited about winning is because at some point when I'm zooming out and looking at more and more of the universe, it feels like at some point I kind of stop caring about, like, how much Timothy wins or even, like, other groups that I'm part of win, and instead I care more about the overall play, which I can imagine you thinking of as, it's the universe winning together, and that's the version of winning that feels most easy for me to, like, prioritize very highly.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I definitely, like, abstractly endorse the idea that, like, what matters really is the universe winning. Like, I want, like, all of the entities in the universe and the, like, future and, like, past agents, like, to causally all agree on, what, like, values we want and, like, move in that direction. That all seems really good. It is hard to reason about, I guess. And maybe it's easiest to start from thinking, like, how one might win, like, for local goals and make, like, better local decisions. In some sense, that was, like, one of the original projects of rationality, I want to say, like, trying to figure out where your thought processes might lead you to make, like, suboptimal decisions and, like, improve on that. And I think there's something, like, really, like, important there. And maybe that seems to me to be the better place to start scaling out, like to then coordinate among like small groups of humans and then larger groups of humans and then like more abstract entities like corporations and AI, what have you.
Governments.
Governments,
Yeah.
yes.
So I liked that. Everything you just said felt like a nice articulation for me of like the winning vision, and I'm curious to hear from you, like how does your truth-seeking vision compare to that, or
Once you know what the right thing to do is, it pretty easily happens.
so the right thing to do is part of truth-seeking? Because that actually wasn't even obvious to me, although I would also say the same thing, but
Truth seeking is not the same as having values, but if you have values plus a perfect understanding of the situation, it's easy to figure out what to do.
okay, so you are treating figuring out the right values as separate from truth-seeking.
It's like there's two branches.
Branches.
There's values and there's what is empirically going on in the world. And then there's how to have those interact.
I am curious about that boundary because it's interesting to think of like whether they're fundamentally like just seamless or if it's really two different things.
So I'm thinking of when we were talking to your imam, and he said that the purpose of charitable giving was to cleanse the soul. And you should give locally because that cleanses the soul more. And I think I pushed a little bit on, but like effectively, right? And he's like, nope, it's optimized for healing the soul. And I also find that horrifying, and I'm looking forward to debating that with him. I feel like there was some process of truth seeking and figuring out my own values, that the right thing to do is the thing that the greatest good for the greatest number. Asterisks. As opposed to the purpose of charity is to be good for your own soul. And so I guess the difference is for empirics, there is just a right answer. And for values, people can disagree, and there are procedures you can run to try and change people's minds or to figure out why you differ. But it's not something I can point to like I can point to and say the sky is blue.
It's hard to have proof that you have the right values.
Well, not just hard, it's that values are kind of, proof is embedded in values. So like, I could yell at your imam for not giving to third world malaria, and he would say, but no, I'm succeeding at the thing I wanted to do. You are asking me to fail by my values. Whereas you can have an empirical debate about, should I give to malaria or should I give to shrimp?
I'm curious where you notice, if anywhere, your intuitions diverging from the types of intuitions Austin's been talking about with winning.
Yeah, well, so if I can bring up another example,
Please do.
and I'm kind of sorry to keep beating up on you,
No.
but I also think it's interesting. After FTX had collapsed, but before the fraud had come out, I believe,
Yeah.
you posted an essay defending Sam
Yep.
that seemed like a very winning-based idea.
Yeah, in some sense, yes.
Okay. And I don't think I would have done that.
Is that like from like standing or like posting something that like could be a mistake, or is that, or like socially that seemed weird, or that you just thought I was like wrong in the things
Well,
that
so
I
I
wrote?
think
Or all, some combination
I
of all
think
this?
you're right. I think by the time I read it, we had enough information to know you were just wrong about some stuff. And I think I read it very closely after it was released, but I'm hedging because I'm not positive.
That makes me wonder, first of all, like, do you, I haven't even read it for the record, but
Sure.
like, do you agree with Elizabeth that you now think it was wrong, or do you still?
Like wrong is like an interesting way. I'm very happy I posted it when I did. I think it like looks more clear that like fraud had occurred, and like at the time I was still like, oh, it's like unclear if it is fraudulent or not. And there's something like, I don't know if I can like do this with the amount of like nuanced delicacy that like really like this kind of conversation merits, but I still think I was like mostly right in the spirit, the points, the like.
Like, I also want to say,
Yeah.
I think that was really brave.
Thank you.
And if you had been right, that would have been a good, like a force for truth seeking.
Sure. And yeah, I think probably it was a force for winning whether the like SBF was committing fraud or not, or something like that, or at least how I thought of it at the time and still think of it now. And to unpack that a bit more, I thought, like, from a like decision theory standpoint, how should the EA movement like itself try and like learn from something like this, or like plan on moving forward? And my assessment at the time was that like probably in response to this, people would be a lot more like scared, a lot more like the weak Doge image, there's like the buff Shiba Inu and like the weak Shiba Inu, and like I think the FTX glory days were kind of like the strong, like we're gonna do everything, we're gonna like save the world. And then now, like, I think at the time, and this also now, like the way EA has drifted is like more towards the, oh, we're gonna like not like do a bunch of PR, we're not going to like try and make waves, we're gonna like protect our like reputation. I view that to be at the time and still now like a huge error. And then another thing though, which is like kind of like an interesting decision theory thing, is like I think if you abandon people who have what I viewed as like earnestly try to support you and your movement, if you just like turn tail on them, like be like, oh, actually SBF, he was not acting according to our principles, and we do not endorse this, and we like like give up on all of the stuff that he did. Then when some future billionaire is looking at your movement, like what will they think? It's like and maybe that's the most like winning-ish like mindset, to be like, oh, you're trying to engage with this not just on the merits right here, but like how this will affect like future game theoretic decisions on like who works with you.
That's interesting, because everyone else's take seems to, we need to separate ourselves from the bad billionaire so that he doesn't tar us.
Yeah, I understand that was your take, and I am just like, this is like extremely short-sighted. Maybe like I am a person who someday hopes to be a billionaire, and like I was like looking at the actions of people like in this space and be like, do I want to be their friends, their allies, if I feel like in like cases when things go badly, they will just like not stand by me?
I mean, things didn't just go badly. He did them badly and hurt a lot of people. Which was not known at the time.
I think like, I don't know, still debatable. I don't know how much we should go into the object level here, but like, everyone made their money back. I mean, yes, some things broke well for that to be able to happen, but like all the like people got like 120% of the value of the crypto holdings at the time, which is not.
Which was like much less than it would have been if they had the crypto.
Yes.
So I don't think you can even call that making people whole.
We can pick at the definitions here. I don't know how much this is wishful thinking, but my sense is that like if SBF had like not actually declared bankruptcy as he says, and like held onto the assets and like tried to resuscitate FTX exchange and like maintain the franchise value there, like I think he maybe could have done it. I think like
I think he would have kept taking bigger and bigger risks, and it would have fallen from something eventually.
Possibly. I'm not sure. Yeah. I like some things that I do feel to be true like right now is like, oh, I think we should like free SBF and like put him to work. I think we should like not like tar and feather all the people who were involved in FTX. I think that would happen to like a way worse degree than like it actually like justified. I know many people, several people at least, who were like FTX employees who could not get work for like 1 or 2 years because of the like black mark on the resume, and they're just like good, like competent and good, like morally good people who just like the world lost on a lot of opportunity because of stuff like this.
So this feels like on a vibes level very much a winning versus truth seeking thing.
Maybe.
Even though I'm not really talking about truth seeking, and you're I don't feel like you're really talking about winning. You're talking about the morality of supporting people.
Yeah. So one thing I'm starting to get about your winning perspective is I see some elements that I associate with high integrity. In particular, the insistence on, if this is what I believe, then like screw the mob. I don't want to negotiate with terrorists. I don't want to be beholden to too much PR considerations. I want to like find the way that I believe is the best way to act and go forward with that.
Oh, this is interesting because I think one of the reasons I was horrified by winning is I considered it related to negotiating with terrorists, or like being held hostage by what other people wanted you to do.
Because winning is defined in ways that is routing through other people's desires?
I guess. Either you want to please them directly, or you want to please them so they buy tickets to your event.
Oh, Yeah, certainly when you're like winning in the ways of like making money or having a successful company.
Yeah.
You're going to be
I
affected.
consider it very much a buffeted by the winds thing, which seems like kind of the opposite of what you mean. Austin is nodding right now.
Yeah. Oh, I realize you can't see me nodding on the podcast. Yes, I don't know. I will definitely endorse the not negotiating with terrorists or figuring out what the right game theory is around terrorist pitches. Sometimes you should negotiate. I don't know.
I think for a while earlier in the conversation, we're like, we're not sure if this is related to winning or not. And actually, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense to me as part of the like ethos of a kind of winning. It's almost like an ethical or something kind of winning is part of what I see in that. And then also, especially when I hear you talking about SBF, I notice a thing that I fear about this ethos is, which I would also associate with a different aspect of integrity as well. How I'm imagining the winning ethos that you're describing being implemented, I worry about it being fragile to either your values or your worldview or something like that. Whereas part of what's great about flow, which I haven't even bothered to define yet, basically flow is like seeking a kind of like alignment that is consistent like at all levels of abstraction that we find in the universe. So like internal alignment and alignment among communities and alignment among humanity, and if we find other aliens, like having everything kind of like flowing together harmoniously rather than undermining each other in ways that we fail to win because we're fighting each other. And I'm sort of imagining that perhaps someone implementing your ethos, the like winning ethos, might find themselves sometimes acts like more often than I think we need to be, where your coherent extrapolated volition would later look back and be like, oh shoot, I was like fighting on the wrong team or something. And I am curious to hear like whether you think that's a risk with the winning ethos, and I'd be happy to explain why I think it's less of a risk in mine, probably also in Truthseeking.
I mean, I don't know if this like is like too clever or something, but in certain cases, when you execute the winning decision function, you end up doing actions that put you on the wrong side of history. And the question is just like, on net, when you do this a bunch of times over a bunch of decisions,
Monte Carlo simulation across timelines.
Does it end up paying out best? And that again is a winning mindset, like maximizing the potential world states that you can reach from where you are like situated right now.
Okay. I think this is getting at something. You mentioned you hosted a party for Gabe Bankman-Fried.
More accurately, somebody else threw the party and Mox was the venue for it.
Okay.
But I was happy to be that venue. I did not feel like Gabe is a person who should be like shunned from the polite society for his association with what happened at FTX.
Okay. Is there an amount of bad he could have been that you wouldn't have hosted the party here?
Yes. I'm trying to think of like what kinds of people are like bad enough such that I would not want to like host a party somebody else threw in their honor.
Yeah.
Well, would you want to host Sam if he wasn't in jail?
Oh yeah, I would want to host Sam.
Why would you want to host Sam?
I think it's kind of like correcting the overall like ecosystem. It's like pushing in the right direction. I don't know that it is the case that Sam Bankman-Fried should literally be the shining example that everyone like looks up to. Little kids be like, I want to be like SBF when I grow up. I'm like, that's probably wrong. But just directionally, I think like a little bit more on the margin of people like kind of thinking that like, yes, like he made like big mistakes, but there were things that he did really, really right. Oh, I think this is a piece I talked about a lot in my post, and is important to me. Like, in some sense, Sam made a lot of really, really good decisions and maybe like a few really bad ones. And I think that's easy to focus on, like, oh, those bad decisions, I would never have made those bad decisions. But I think I have a lot more sympathy for somebody like Sam because I am sometimes in the position of making a lot of decisions too. And I think like, oh, the hard thing is not to avoid the couple of bad decisions. The hard thing is to actually like have figured out what all the right decisions you could have made were such that you are in the position to then have to think hard about the one or two bad decisions too. And like many people never get to that place for the goals that matter to them. And I think it is like something somewhat instructive to like learn from the perspective of Sam Bankman-Fried having won a lot at something. Of course, like it's even better to look at, I don't know, something like
Won by cheating.
I don't think a lot of it was cheating. I think a lot of it was actually just like doing the actual right things, like hiring good people and like being good at fundraising and like identifying a good market opportunity. I think, yeah, I would credit not that much of the success of FTX, and I could be wrong about this. Like somebody who like understands the whole story of Alameda better might tell me that like, oh, actually, like the mixing customer funds was like very important, and if not for that, FTX would never have won compared to like Binance or whatever. That just seems like not that true to me because Binance is like there as like a proof of concept of like crypto exchange making a bunch of money, still worth a lot.
It seems like what you're saying is we have to know the truth in order to judge if he was winning or not.
I think a bit, yes. I think like more truth seeking would be good, but the fundamental thing is that like I don't know, it seems easier to do truth seeking than to figure out winning or something like that maybe. But yeah, you're making a face, Elizabeth, now, and
Yeah, well, so like I'm offended, but also I definitely find truth seeking easier than winning, so I can't immediately argue the opposite. I think certainly by the winning definition I was using of being buffeted around, like winning, that winning was very correlated with popularity. I think that's easier than truth seeking when people don't want to hear it. And when people want to hear the truth, we don't have to dress it up as truth seeking. It's just a fact.
I want to acknowledge what I agree with you about and what you were just saying.
Yeah.
And I think that'll also help me articulate where I don't agree. I imagine you're very like, you almost feel like you're a great like fighter against like mob mentality. I don't know if it's just a coincidence that keeps coming up in these examples we're using, but like to me, I'm seeing like there's these like principles that you're willing to like die on the hill of being like, guys, like there's this good thing about this situation that might have a lot of terrible things about it, and until we're able to admit that, then I'm not gonna like go home and stop talking about it. It's like an important thing to recognize that, you know, like such and such tactic that SBF used was in fact a great tactic. He was very smart to find it. It's perhaps good for the world that he was implementing it. And then the fact that there were other mistakes made doesn't stop you from wanting to like stand up for that truth.
I'm not trying to die on this hill. That seems like an anti-winning.
Okay, but actually that's a great example. Like I do find myself nervous imagining like people listening to this and perhaps like you know, being mad at you or boycotting Manafund and things that these various projects that I love a lot. And I'm curious, like wouldn't it, especially from the perspective of winning, wouldn't the easier path be to be like, I'm just like not gonna like, I'm not going to think about it, worry about SBF or defend any of his stuff. I'm just going to like let the mob carry him off to jail if that's what they're going to do. And instead I'll like, if I think that he was smart and right about some things, then even better that no one else is paying attention to them. And I will win even more if I like take those gems and put them into my own crown.
I think it's not, to me, just about winning for myself. You mentioned this a little bit earlier where like, you know, trying to win for like the universe, and that matters to me. I mean, I think what I am doing, what one does when they like stand for values, is not just try and like improve their own situation, but also speak loudly with actions, demonstrate virtue, like set good norms for the world around when you should stand up to social pressure or like say something unpopular or sacrifice some of your like reputation in service of larger goals. I think these are like generally like pro-social and help like us more broadly win, like us, the humanity, us, you know, thinking entities, things like that.
Cool. Yeah, and I agree with that, and I respect that. And I do notice, like, hearing you in all this, I feel like more confident than before this conversation that if the mobs turned against me at some point, I would very much not expect you to like join the mobs unless you had very clear reasoned that you thought that the mob was right and that whatever, I should be taken to jail or something. I do appreciate that. I'm like, man, you're such like a truth seeker in that way, like a values truth seeker. And then there's something where I'm like, oh man, I feel like you're missing part of the strategy that feels important to me, and it does feel related, like keywords here feel like integrity or humility. And there's something about how I have come to a place where I kind of feel used to not seeing the full picture and, you know, feel like I've learned the hard way that like I'm never tracking all the things that are worth tracking. And when I am able to tap into other people's wisdom and perspectives and kind of lean on some of the crowd, some of the wisdom of the crowd, if you will, without falling prey to some of the mob mentality problems that I think we would all agree can be problems, then that's where I feel most empowered, especially both at the collective level and even at the individual level. And in that sense, it becomes my most believed strategy for winning. And I have no problem with the fact that we can translate between all of our strategies, especially when we're at our best. It's not going to be surprising that we're actually tapping into all these strategies. And so I'm not yet sure if I've succeeded at gesturing at a thing that means anything to you, but since you're nodding, maybe I'll pause there and get your reaction.
I do think like integrity, like on at least a personal level and maybe on like a societal level, matters a lot to me. And I think humility does as well. And maybe like these examples don't really like bring it out or something. Like, and maybe in the cases when you are standing against a crowd.
If SBF ending up in jail doesn't bring out like a desire for humility, what's gonna do that?
I mean, like,
I thought he was good for the world too. Like
Yeah.
so I can speak from my own experience
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Like, I didn't know him very well. I talked to
Yeah.
him like 1 hour because
Yeah.
he wanted to tell me how he thought CFAR should be run.
Sure.
But like, I thought he was a great blessing on EA and on the world, and he was going to bring a bunch, billions of dollars to blah, blah, blah. And then, so I feel deeply humbled by the fact that he's freaking in jail, and I think he belongs to be there. And regardless of whether you agree that he belongs to be in jail, like I'm not that worried about that particular question because jail's such a crappy place. I can imagine lots of ways I don't think people should be in jail, but it feels deeply humbling to me. Like I was very wrong by virtue of the fact that I was so excited by him and did nothing to adjust any of his behavior in any way. And I feel like in retrospect, I feel like by being whatever you call not acting in the face of something bad, I was this C word complicit in the whole thing, and I feel bad. I am surprised if you didn't have any like updates towards humility from that.
I like wish I could say that I did have like an update towards humility or something. I think like humility is like a very important virtue in my head. I mentioned this before. I'm Catholic. The like person that Catholics look up to the most, Jesus, famously like embodied humility in many like specific ways that I think are really important, and I would like to live out. I'm not sure that humility is one of my like stronger virtues. It is a thing I would like want to continue to work on. Both, I don't know, the regular status humility and also like epistemic humility. The kind you're talking about around like updating when like it seems like the world is delivering like some kind of feedback to you. And with all that said, I don't know. I'm just like, I'm not sure I'm wrong. I don't know.
Because it's sort of it seems to you that like there wasn't any important thing that you were wrong about with SBF, and therefore like the world isn't telling you to update about humility. Is that right?
I think the thing I intended to say about SBF, which is something like making correct decisions is really important. SBF was good at those, much of that. And like to like discard all of that and try and I don't know, like update towards like doing less and being less ambitious or whatever. That all seemed like a mistake. Still, I think I stand by like that piece of it very strongly. And like I guess there's a question of like should SBF be in jail? I don't know if it's that interesting, but yeah, I could see myself getting argued into a position where I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe that is the correct sentence or something.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a deep crux
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah.
That helps, and I'm noticing that I think part of the difference in how you and I are treating the epistemics of these things
Sure.
and therefore updating on them is my impression is that you're more treating things as isolated examples or ideas, and that makes it easier for you to say like, oh yeah, he was right about these things, and he was just like wrong and catastrophic ways. At least I'm calling them catastrophic in terms of what ended up happening.
Sure.
Like he's clearly not winning by being in jail and
Agreed.
bankrupt, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think for me, part of the like flow perspective, I'm still not sure I like that word, but is that everything is connected. And I think it's not a coincidence that sometimes the people that are most able to like find loopholes or take advantage of existing situations to like win, at least in a status way, it's going to be more important to the outcomes how aligned and high integrity they are as they do that. Because basically part of what they're doing is they're breaking out outside of, at least partially outside of social norms, which are sort of like a comforting blanket for society that are helpful because they helps us all get along, but often end up creating some instances where people are reflexively wrong or unable to see some aspect of the truth. And so when someone breaks out of that, like a SBF, or like in my mind I'm also thinking like Elon Musk, then it from my perspective is more incumbent upon them to regulate themselves and take even more responsibility for their own actions, because they're sort of like going off in a new direction and not abiding by societal standards. And then if people like that, especially if they started with good faith and then despite that end up having big negative consequences, then I feel like that should be a big opportunity to update towards humility and perhaps many other things for people that, you know, dare to be ambitious like them. And I don't have any problem with ambition. I also consider myself quite ambitious. Like for me, humility actually isn't anti-ambitious, but it does cause me to want to like make sure that my strategies aren't accidentally fragile in the way that you can go from thinking you're saving the world with billions of dollars to then ending up in jail with everyone hating you and all your friends.
Yeah, like I think the stuff around humility, the stuff around flow, like also makes sense to me. I don't feel like I would have disagreed with it. I especially think I would have disagreed with it less than like what I see as like the failure modes of like truth seeking. Maybe because flow is like a newer concept, and I'm still like juggling it in my head a bit. Maybe I've like observed a lot of like rationalist-y behavior, people who like care a lot about truth seeking and like kind of have a sense of what the failure states are. I feel like I have like more to like argue with there. Maybe that's
That's
like,
fair. I don't think I've articulated a way for it to be particularly actionable.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, I do think there's something around like focusing on integrity more than winning, especially the more power that you have. And I'm curious to hear what the failure modes of truth
Yeah,
seeking.
so I can volunteer one,
Sure.
which is you just get up your own ass learning things and never actually act on it.
Yeah, I think I see that a lot. I see people like learn a lot and not do much. I think an important component of learning is moving quickly in a way that like truth seeking kind of pushes against moving quickly. Truth seeking pushes towards like gathering more and being more certain in your conclusions or something. But I just think like, you know, in life.
I think that's very fair. I just think it's a virtue.
Oh, sure, yeah. Sorry, like moving quickly is a virtue.
I think if truth seeking is slowing you down, that's probably good. I wish we had a camera for Austin's face right now.
Skeptical look or something.
Oh, it was pain. That was physical pain.
Okay. Whereas I was like, I mostly agree with Elizabeth, although I think I know part of your pain.
Yeah, maybe I do need to like sit down and like write more like what the specific failures of truth seeking seem to have been. I don't identify as a rationalist. I don't know if I mentioned this before, and I think some of that is around like what I view as failure modes from that like particular mindset. Another one is like social grace, maybe. It's like when you like seek truth and broadcast it, maybe that puts you at odds with like certain ways people behave, like social norms. And I think like a straw rationalist is a kind of person who is like kind of disagreeable, people don't really like maybe doesn't get invited to parties sometimes, that kind of thing. And but I think there's like value in like harmony or in like
But what if the harmony is factually incorrect?
yeah, that's a good question. And I think like maybe it's sometimes more important to have that harmony than to dispel it, or to like spend the straw rationalist thing is like spend a bunch of effort like arguing about that and like trying to get clarity on it when it like actually just doesn't matter nearly as much as
I think I basically agree with you. Like, it makes, if we had more time, I would ask how that compares to like inviting controversial speakers to.
Sure.
Like, there's definitely a point at which I think, okay, you don't need to tell your grandmother the sweater is ugly. You
Sure.
just don't need to.
Yeah.
And I'm on board with that, but I am mostly on the side of what harmony is disrupted by truth-seeking should be disrupted by truth-seeking.
What I remember, my cached belief is that I no longer agree with the phrase "everything that can be destroyed by the truth should be," and then now I'm like, wait, do I also not believe what you just said? But
Yeah. I think it's like the kind of thing that you need to get to the concrete examples and like figure out where we like draw like our lines or something. But really quickly, I think rationalists would probably just be doing much better as like a group or as like individuals if they could integrate more of what other people like believe, even if they're wrong about those beliefs, and try to like navigate that world, as opposed to like sticking to their guns in an unpopular way.
I'm so surprised you're taking this position because it's like violating the whole model I was building about you as being the like dying on the hill. So I'm glad you're breaking my models, of course, because I'm also a truth seeker.
I think maybe like the way I phrased it was too abstract, and if you get into the examples, it helps like delineate like which things I mean. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because you clearly were willing to violate social harmony in favor of someone you thought was providing value in other ways. And it sounds like stand by that decision.
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, we are unfortunately out of time. Thank you so much for arguing with us for an hour.
Thank you so much for coming by, and I really enjoyed this discussion. I am curious to see what reception we get.
Me
Please
too.
come to Manifest. It is not a controversial conference. It is not about all the edgy that.
Why don't you tell us some things it is about?
Yeah.
What is it? It's about prediction markets. About like celebrating prediction markets. It's not just like a conference. I frame it as a festival. People have a lot of fun there. They like throw their own events. They wrestle in the park. They like lecture about Socrates at in the late nights. They sit around the fire and chat and like make s'mores. That's like the feeling of Manifest, really. Like mostly an online community getting together. People who are all like generally quite intellectual, who have pretty niche, weird beliefs perhaps, and are excited to kind of like share them with you. That's what the spirit of Manifest is.
This seems related to harmony?
Somewhat. I think, like people feel much better sharing things like this in person, actually. I like Manifest as a in-person like conference because you can talk about complicated things with much more nuance than you can like over Twitter or like on like a Discord like thread or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. I'd also like to thank EA Infrastructure Fund and all of our donors via Mana Fund for supporting this podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.